Philadelphia 76ers is they tried to play two different things. They tried to play contender, and they tried to play protect Joel Embiid. It wasn't doing Joel Embiid any good. This goes back to what I've talked about numerous times on this network. Why did they let him play in the first place? Why was he on the Olympic team? I mean, we looked at it last year in the playoffs against the Knicks. The damn kid was on one leg.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're gonna go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's gonna help me get the job done. There is not gonna be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this once?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on Sports.
Good morning. Welcome to NewsWire. Happy Friday. Great to be back with you for our edition of the show here on SportsGrid. Going to be a fun one. We got the NHL trade deadline coming your way at 3 o'clock Eastern. Maybe some betting positions potentially to take before this thing expires. So we will preview that and give you an idea of some of the things that could happen and some things that have happened as well. Also, Sam McQuillan will join us from Legal Sports Report. We'll dive into the very latest in the NBA, college basketball, and of course some Major League Baseball as well. So stay with us here on the grid as we get you ready for the big weekend in college hoops, NBA, and NHL as well. Let's get started with a couple of sports betting stories. And unfortunately, we'll begin in the state of Georgia, where it does not appear any progress is going to be made toward legalizing sports betting this year. We could put this thing to bed. Discussions come to an end for 2025. No sports betting bills were called to the House floor. So the House or Senate have not passed sports betting in Georgia. The only time that this could potentially come to pass would be now 2026 in the next legislature. So in 2026, it could happen, but Georgia will not be one state to legalize sports betting this year. Meanwhile, an interesting story coming here from FanDuel, as there are some concerns with these prediction market operators. I guess that's a fair way to say it, not necessarily sports books. And this is surrounding this company called Kalshi, which is a prediction betting business. And, I don't even know if you would call it betting. They call it prediction. But needless to say, essentially, you are trying to predict the outcome of something. Kalshi, very popular as a company for somewhere where you can actually try to predict the presidency of the United States and a lot of other things as well. Different award ceremonies, the amount of people watching certain things on television. FanDuel seems to have a pretty big problem with this because they have a report that basically says they're scrutinizing the markets. Nevada regulators took a big step against the sites with cease and desist in Nevada on Wednesday. FanDuel is also saying similar, that they don't really know how this is going to end and will it even end well. Here is their statement on the prediction market business such as Kalshi. While we believe that they're well positioned to compete with new entrants in the sports betting and gaming markets, our online betting and gaming offerings, the dynamic is evolving, and we can't assure you that the results of operations will be adversely affected by the expansion of legalized online gaming and betting. Prediction markets are a little bit dicey and a little bit different because they're not necessarily based on the outcomes of actual games. I think that's why this is in play. So stay tuned. We'll see if these things continue or not. One thing that is continuing, that is the success of the Los Angeles Lakers. They win again last night. 113 to 109 in overtime over the Knicks. The Lakers have won 8 straight games. This trade for Luka has worked out in a big way for them. He had 32 points last night. LeBron James had 31. The Knicks basically have had a great season, but they can't beat anybody good. They're 40-22. Just keep losing against teams like Cleveland, Oklahoma City, Boston, and LA. Meanwhile, needless to say, J.J. Redick after the game talked about the great defensive effort and the effort from not just his stars on the Lakers, but the secondary players as well.
Night like tonight, when it felt like a lot of things didn't go our way and what wasn't easy, they often can come from your non-stars. And, I thought Jackson's defense in the second half, Gabe's shot making was huge. I mean, Gabe doesn't make those 4 threes, we're not even in the game. I think for the group overall, once we reached their level of effort and how hard they were playing, we were right there. And we all felt that in the second half. And again, it goes back to the poise thing. You make a run, you get it to 8, they go back up to 10 or 11. You make a run, you get it to 7, it goes back up. And our guys just stayed the course and refused to give in and let go of the rope. It seemed like Brunson had an answer for everything, and he was fantastic tonight. And our guys, in what felt like a playoff game at times, really just got it out of win.
The Steph Curry road tour continued in Brooklyn, and my gosh, has this been a great road trip for him. Curry had 40 points again last night. The Warriors finished their road trip 4-1, and they beat the Nets 121 to 119. Jimmy Butler also stepped up in a big way. He had 25 points. In case you're keeping tabs, the Warriors are 10-2 since Butler entered the starting lineup back on February the 8th. But naturally, it has been the Curry show. And Steve Kerr, the head coach of the Warriors, talked about how dominant he has been on the road.
Steph just had an incredible trip, put on a show in every city. What he does, it's amazing. Just the show that he puts on, the joy that he brings to so many fans who are coming to see him play in all these different cities. Every fan base loves Steph, and there's a reason. He's an incredible performer.
I mean, your record usually indicates a good team. The style being dominant on both ends of the floor in different ways. There's all type of data that's indicative of if you're like top 10 in both offense and defense, you're usually in that contender category, and we have been since the trade. So that's positive, but you take all of that, but you just have a belief every night that you can win, and then you just keep doing that over and over and over again. And then when you get in a playoff series, which we hope to be in, you just commit to winning. And I think everybody's on the same page. The biggest thing is just understanding your role and what you do and how it impacts winning and everybody.
The Warriors right now, one of those teams nobody's going to want to play in the NBA playoffs. Same could also be said, of course, for the Boston Celtics. They beat the 76ers pretty handily last night, 123 to 105. Jason Tatum had 35 points in this game. Peyton Pritchard has been a really solid player for Boston this season. He had 19 points as well. The story of the game, though, was Derek White. He had 12 points, but it came after getting his teeth knocked out during the game. I don't think they'll grow back. Here's Derek White.
I want to know how.
So I got hit in the face, but they were temporary, and I was supposed to go in probably like 2 weeks ago, but I kept pushing it off to get like my permanent ones, but I'm gonna go tomorrow.
So you just like shove them back in, shove them back on?
Not exactly, but kind of.
You knew right away.
Yeah. Luckily, they were like right there, and I picked them up, and then we went to the back, and I was trying to debate how I was gonna go back, and then got some glue, and I put the mouthpiece on, and we were good to go.
Does it hurt now?
Did all of them come out? Like, how many teeth fell out?
So these four are like connected. It's like a bridge.
Okay.
I think it's what the dentist people call it. Shout out Boston Dental. I'll see y'all tomorrow, by the way. And so that fell out.
Well, I guess in some way, Derek White's got to figure out his teeth moving forward. All right, Cincinnati Bengals have a lot of contracts to give out this offseason. We know Jamar Chase is one. Maybe T. Higgins is another. I guess they've decided that Trey is the one that they're going to have to part ways with. He is seeking a trade. Bengals are going to let it happen. He's one of the best defensive rushers in the NFL. He had 17 and a half sacks last season. He's looking for an extension. Probably not going to get one given what Cincinnati has to do. So look for Hendrickson to potentially get traded. Dan Lanning has reached a new 6-year deal. He's going to continue to coach the Oregon Ducks. Mitch Morse has retired after playing 10 seasons in the NFL. He recently played with the Jaguars, and now the Jaguars have decided not to release Christian Kirk. Instead, they're going to trade him to the Houston Texans. Meanwhile, Bobby Wagner has signed a 1-year deal with the Washington Commanders. He's made the Pro Bowl 11 times. The Browns have restructured Deshaun Watson's deal. They cleared $36 million in cap space. Okay. And the Browns owner, by the way, has said he's not going to meet with Myles Garrett. So who knows if he'll get traded or not. Grapefruit League action coming your way in Major League Baseball, 1 o'clock Eastern. We'll see Vladimir Guerrero Jr. back on the field for the Jays. He recently told ESPN Sportis that he rejected a $600 million contract extension. We'll be right back talking basketball with Gilbert McGregor.
Brady Tkachuk saying that if his brother did miss that overtime period against Canada like we saw him do, it must be serious out there. And of course, Brady Tkachuk, not a doctor, but you've got to wonder the status of Matthew Tkachuk and what we're going to find out.
Game time for all of these teams and all these players that were, teammates. Now they're facing off against each other. Now they're back to being teammates, whatever it might be. Like, it's time to get things rolling back in the right direction.
HL today, only on SportsGrid.
We know the Knicks are talented. They're 37-20. It's not a bad season by any stretch. They're just not being the upper echelon team.
This is the Knicks team right now. They're a very good team. And I'm a Knicks fan. You can't look at there and say, this team can win a championship. They're not good enough. They're not good enough defensively. Are we the New York Knicks or are we the New York Fugazis? Just forget about it.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
You have Duke the 1, Houston the 2. They're the 2 best defensive teams in the country. I want to see them play for the right to go to the Final Four because I think that would be a kick-ass game.
Duke is really great on both ends of the floor. They can score and they can defend, and that's why they win by big numbers all the time, because they're really good on both ends of the floor. I don't trust Houston's offense.
Pharrell coast to coast, only on SportsGrid. The Eagles got it done. If you back them, you're celebrating. Football season may be over, but the action never stops.
Are you ready for some baseball?
At SportsGrid, we're always in the game. We bring you 24/7 betting insights, expert picks, and real-time analysis. Next big play is already in motion. Are you ready? It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
We've got Gilbert McGregor from Sporting News here with us on the show. Recap some of the games in the NBA last night. Get some previews of tonight's game as well. Maybe a significant injury for the New York Knicks, as the point spread would indicate in Los Angeles tonight. But let's get to it, Gilbert. Thanks for coming back here on the show. I mean, my gosh, the Lakers at this point have gone from, somewhat of a play-in game, afterthought. What is LeBron James even playing for at this point? They make this trade that's supposed to be, for the future when LeBron is gone, and it has been the opposite of what everybody has said, Gilbert. I mean, the Lakers have been one of the hottest teams in the NBA. I mean, maybe they're not OKC and maybe they're not Cleveland, but beyond that, I mean, what's going on here? I mean, is this team a legit West contender at this point?
Absolutely, Craig. This is a Lakers team who, quite frankly, and I'll admit, I did not believe in as constructed earlier in the year. And as you said, the Luka Doncic trade was something that we thought was for the next 5 years, and not necessarily the next 5 months. And this is a team now, they're 18-3 in their last 21 games. They've surged toward the top of the Western Conference, and there isn't really a team that's hotter than them in the NBA. And the way they've been doing it, we saw it on display last night. Luka Doncic and LeBron James are playing like top 7, top 8 players in the NBA, and they're getting it done on the defensive end. They held the Knicks to 109 points last night in a game that went to overtime. So a formula that works pretty well. Play good defense and have two superstars. It's working for the Lakers.
Yeah, it definitely is. And 63 points for the two of them last night, 20 assists, 19 rebounds, 20 of 46 from the field. And what did we learn about this trade, Gilbert? Sometimes none of us know what is actually going to happen in sports. We can say whatever we want, but these are athletes, and I would tell you, from the Mavericks' point of view at the time, I'll be clear what I said here on the show. I thought there was something we didn't know about Luka at the time, and it would all come out, and maybe that will eventually. But I got to tell you, right now, that trade potentially could sway teams from trading their superstars by seeing what the outcome is of this one, and how Luka definitely seems to be more inspired with the Lakers. That's the danger zone that you do when you make a trade like that. But anyway, okay, so Jalen Brunson got hurt in that game, by the way, last night. I don't think he's going to play tonight, or maybe, for the next week or two, we'll see. I know the playoffs still some time for him to get healthy, but that would indicate this game on Friday night, because right now the Clippers are up to 8-point favorites, total of 220.5. I'm guessing, Gilbert, that Jalen Brunson is as far as the point spread is concerned, I'm going to guess this is like a several points, 3 points, 4 points, something like that. If they know he's in, maybe the spread is 5 or something along those lines. Can they hang tonight with the Clippers? I know Clippers, James Harden's playing good ball right now.
Yeah, the Clippers actually had something to show me. I picked against them the other day, and James Harden goes for 50 points for the first time in a long time in a win over the Detroit Pistons. But I think in a game like this, second end of a back-to-back, the Clippers probably would have gotten a few points anyway. Now you factor in the fact that Jalen Brunson's injury didn't look good last night. That's probably why we see the spread look the way it does. That being said, I think this Knicks team is a scrappy team. They hear the noise coming off of a really tough loss. Didn't have to travel. They're going to play in a different building tonight than they did last night. But I don't expect the Knicks to win the game, but I do expect them to keep it close just because they're a scrappy team. Karl-Anthony Towns could have a big game. He's back on the floor and getting some more contributions from across the board, whether it's OG Anunoby or Josh Hart. The Knicks will keep it close.
I think so. I think this could be a competitive game tonight. Meanwhile, the West is getting sort of crazy here with Golden State winning and Houston winning again. I mean, generally speaking, you don't usually see, more than 5 teams in any conference being so many games over 500. This was the old MO of the Western Conference in the NBA, and we're back there again. I mean, look at Minnesota. They're 35-29, but yet they've had the most success against Oklahoma City of any team in the NBA. So, I mean, to me, these are all really dangerous teams. And I think that's what will make the playoffs fun, Gilbert, is I just don't think you're going to see like sweeps or anything like that. I think long series are coming in the West.
Right. It's a story we talk and tell every year, but this year more than others, everything's going to really depend on matchups and how this bracket shapes out in the Western Conference. When I look at it right now, I kind of look at the tiers, obviously OKC in a tier of its own. The Lakers and the Nuggets, I think, are two teams who have superstars on the team, and they've been there before. So I like them a little more than I like a team like Memphis or Houston, who have run into some difficult times recently, and Memphis is dealing with the injury to Jaren Jackson Jr. Hopefully he can get back on the floor soon. Golden State, I think, is on the heels of Memphis and Houston. They're continuing to win. Steph Curry, new energy, playing alongside Jimmy Butler. I wouldn't be surprised if they continue to move up the standings before the season's over. And Minnesota, I think, is a bit of a wild card. Anthony Edwards, we saw what they did last year. They're starting to figure some things out, figure some lineup things out. And if they can get Julius Randle to figure out the best role he can play on that team, I think that Minnesota team could be a first-round exit, or they can make a run to the Western Conference Finals. And all cards are on the table for a lot of teams in the Western Conference.
Yeah, and look at those odds. Let me show you those odds one more time. These are the FanDuel odds to win. Take a look at this. I mean, Golden State is very close to Denver. That is close at this stage of the season. If you're telling me that Golden State is going to be, let's say, plus 700 or plus 800, I mean, if you think Golden State has a shot, you got to do this now, because they basically have them projected as one of the top 4 teams in the West right now. So that's a fascinating look at that. All right, real quick. I don't want to get ahead of I got excited there. I saw a bet that I like. Okay, Suns at the Nuggets tonight. I mean, you basically need a Hall of Fame performance by Kevin Durant at this point every time the Suns are out there to keep the game close. Nuggets are big favorites, total 237.5. Any position you like tonight?
I do like the Nuggets. You mentioned Kevin Durant already, and they used a big performance from Colin Gillespie, for those of you familiar with college basketball in years past, to have that comeback over the Clippers earlier in the week. But outside of Kevin Durant and a little bit of Devin Booker, nothing really inspires me about this Suns team at this point in the season. I think they're ready for it to be over. I think Kevin Durant knows his days there are numbered, and the Nuggets are trying to keep pace with the Lakers in the Western Conference. They'll come out motivated ahead of another big game this weekend. I think they play the Thunder soon, too.
All right. Well, we love it, Gilbert. It's going to be a fun weekend in the NBA, and I know in the coming weeks we'll have some lockdown in the playoff positioning. Oklahoma City looks to be that team there. We'll see where Boston, Cleveland, and some of the others end up. We'll catch up again next week here on NewsWire. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it, Craig.
All right. Coming up next, Sam McQuillan will join us from Legal Sports Report. And also a reminder for those of you who follow Major League Baseball, we're going to have Fantasy Sports Today tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern. You can catch me and Joe Pisapia on that show. And then Sunday morning, me and George Kurtz on Saturday morning, and then Joe Pisapia and Matt Stryker on Sunday morning. So catch that. But up next, we got the sound off. We'll hear from Brian Cashman. We'll talk about the Max Crosby deal. And also Kevin Walsh weighs in on the NBA's Defensive Player of the Year. We'll be right back.
Philadelphia 76ers, they tried to play two different things. They tried to play contender, and they tried to play protect Joel Embiid. It wasn't doing Joel Embiid any good. This goes back to what I've talked about numerous times on this network. Why did they let him play in the first place? Why was he on the Olympic team? I mean, we looked at it last year in the playoffs against the Knicks. The damn kid was on one leg.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this once?
Oh, Donnie, you've got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. Let's get to the very latest in Major League Baseball and hear from the general manager of the Yankees on Giancarlo Stanton. Also, Ben and Donnie weigh in on the mega deal given to Max Crosby and who will win the NBA's Defensive Player of the Year. It's time now for the SportsGrid Sound Off. All right, let's begin in Tampa, Florida, where the New York Yankees have not only opened up spring training, but folks, we're about halfway through. Opening day is coming up on March 27th. That's the good news. bad news for the Yankees is Giancarlo Stanton will not open up the season with the team, and his future for this season seems to be a little bit murky. He's had some PRP injections in his elbows with an S. Very bizarre offseason as it has been for Giancarlo Stanton. Here's the update from Yankees GM Brian Cashman.
Brian, do you have any kind of an idea on a timetable for this? I mean, he said he had not swung a bat for 4 weeks or so before.
Yeah, I think it was 3 weeks before camp. So ultimately he was dealing with it in the end of last year, and obviously thought we were in a good place, and I think he was feeling like in a good place, but then it reared its ugly head, about 3 weeks before camp, and is my understanding, and so now we're dealing with it. So, give it the time it needs, and we'll clearly look forward to getting him back at some point, but obviously in the near term that won't be the case.
Surgery ever discussed in this? I think that's could be a 2 or 3 month recovery for that.
It'd be a last resort. It's always, again, like everything else you approach, you approach things with, I'm not sure what the right word would be, but I can't rule out a surgery, but I know it's not recommended in the front end of this thing. But obviously, if you have a number of different failed attempts, then you start looking at different ways of intervention.
I don't need to tell you if you're doing a fantasy baseball draft, you may want to pass on Stanton, at least until the end of your draft. Meanwhile, Max Crosby, once upon a time, was a high draft pick for the Las Vegas Raiders, and now it looks like he's going to potentially finish his career in Las Vegas, signing a long-term extension, the highest paid non-quarterback in the National Football League. Here's the early lines. Ben Stevens and Donnie Rightside on the mega deal for Max.
Somebody who is not going anywhere, at least for the foreseeable future. That's Max Crosby in Sin City. A new regime for the Raiders, led by Pete Carroll and John Spytek. Not a lot of talent on the roster, so your most talented player, got to keep him in-house. The Raiders do, with a large payday for Max Crosby. 3-year, $106.5 million deal. That is $35.5 million annually, DRS, making Max Crosby now the highest paid non-QB in NFL history.
Max Crosby is great. Max Crosby was probably due for an extension. Max Crosby is one of the best defensive pass rushers. That is a premium position. Nobody looks at that contract and says that's ridiculous, because it's not. I just think it's ridiculous that the Raiders have paid out that contract when they were so talent depleted. And again, I just said, they need to spend money. There is a floor in the salary cap in the NFL they have to spend up to. But I don't know if the assets go the right direction, because I think they should be rebuilding. So if you pay this money and say, hey, what's our production back? Let's just say Max gets 17 sacks next year. Donnie, that's money well spent. And the Raiders still win 5 games. Was it money well spent, or should you have gotten 2 first-round picks back for Max Crosby, which absolutely would be the going rate?
Well, we'll see what Trey Hendrickson ends up going for, too. Remember, that player is now on the trade market, but Donnie brings up a really good point. Are the Raiders in their best position signing a long-term contract to a player that may not be on a winning team? Very possible. Meanwhile, the NBA is closing out the regular season. We're almost there. Playoffs are on deck. Let's hear from Kevin Walsh on the NBA's Defensive Player of the Year possibilities.
The Defensive Player of the Year race has been impacted by injury throughout this season. Victor Wembanyama had it signed, sealed, and delivered until an injury took him out for the second half of this season. You would likely be looking at one of the OKC guys from the front court, Isaiah Hartenstein, Chet Holmgren, as front runners if they were able to stay healthy. Neither will come close to that game's minimum. Jaren Jackson Jr., now injured. He likely will still play 65 games, but he still might play 10, 12 less games than the players that he's competing against. It now looks like it's Evan Mobley's to lose, and it's probably rightly being viewed that way. The Cleveland Cavaliers are going to take home hardware with the caliber of season that they're having, likely DPOY and Coach of the Year. If anyone is going to spoil, though, this DPOY party, it's Atlanta's Dyson Daniels, who's looking to have a historic steal season, so we'll have to keep our eye on it. Craig, it's back to you.
All right, thanks, Kevin. We'll catch Kevin, of course, throughout the weekend here on SportsGrid. Coming up next, Sam McQuillan joins us from Legal Sports Report. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Philadelphia 76ers is they tried to play two different things. They tried to play contender, and they tried to play protect Joel Embiid. It wasn't doing Joel Embiid any good. This goes back to what I've talked about numerous times on this network. Why did they let him play in the first place? Why was he on the Olympic team? I mean, we looked at it last year in the playoffs against the Knicks. The damn kid was on one leg.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're gonna go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's gonna help me get the job done. There is not gonna be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this once?
Oh, Donnie, you've got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
All right, Sam McQuillan is with us from Legal Sports Report. Actually, pretty big surprise from one of the bigger sports betting companies, BetMGM. We're going to get to that here in a minute, but first let's touch on the very latest on Jontay Porter, who's known, Sam, for only one thing, and that is betting his own props. That's the only thing this guy is ever going to be known for the rest of his life. Sorry to say, made a very big mistake. He's going to get sentenced at some point. I wonder what the delay is here, though. Like, don't they have enough evidence here? Or, I mean, they just still, I mean, it seems like there's other stories that are not about Jontay Porter, but some of the same individuals in this sort of betting ring. Maybe that's what's holding it up.
Yeah, it's a really sad story, especially given the fact that his brother is Michael Porter Jr. And if he hadn't done this, he probably would have just been known as Michael Porter Jr.'s brother, who barely played in the NBA, bounced around in a few teams. But sentencing for former Toronto Raptors center Jontay Porter was delayed this week again. It was actually supposed to happen last December. He was supposed to be sentenced for admitting to fixing these two games or manipulating his performance on these two games, alerting essentially this ring of illicit bettors that he was going to fake an injury, bet my unders on all my player props, it'll cash. It did cash. It got caught pretty quickly when the sports books say that he's the most bet guy, somebody you never heard of. It's going to set off some red flags, but this is the second time his sentencing has been delayed. And to your point, Craig, we don't really know why. It could be a number of things. Originally, when it came out, it's the only thing that we knew was that he was involved in these two games, and this illicit betting happened. But now we've had this recent string of college scandals. It's been about 9 games so far in the past 2 months that federal authorities have flagged as also potentially part of this gambling ring that Porter was involved in. So while Porter's already admitted to doing this, this could be a case where they want to gather more information about more individuals involved now that it seems to be a much bigger operation than we originally knew. And we're still, apparently there's still going to be more college games to come that have been involved in this kind of big scheme. Now, whether Porter was involved in the college games, that I don't think that would be likely, but he might have more information about these people who were involved. This could also just be a procedural delay. It's no secret that the wheels of justice grind very slowly in America, and it can take a long time to get things done. The NCAA is still doing their investigation with the federal authorities. So Porter right now is just waiting. He faces up to 20 years in federal prison for this crime. Obviously the NBA has made an example out of him, banning him for life, but I would be surprised if he got 20 years. I think 2.5, 3.5 years is more likely in this case, but definitely a warning story for any athlete who thinks about doing this kind of thing.
Yeah, and we keep hearing about the possibilities of some of these things happening in college basketball now as well. Okay, so there's a story up on Legal Sports Report about BetMGM and their company laying off employees in New Jersey. If I'm not mistaken, Sam, there was a story that we talked about earlier in the week with a potential tax hike in New Jersey as well. So I'm sort of reading between the lines here, and I guess you could tell me if I'm wrong. Are they just not happy with the revenue that's coming in New Jersey? And did they just take a big hit when New York legalized sports betting? Because I just thought that there was enough money to go around here, but it certainly seems like the market is changing in the Garden State.
Yeah, you're not completely far off, but it's not so direct in terms of, hey, New Jersey is thinking about hiking up their tax rate, so we're going to lay off people there. It's sort of symptomatic of what every state is doing. It's not just New Jersey who's talking about raising their tax. The whole overall environment of sports betting is becoming increasingly more and more expensive, and to compete with the top players, you have to spend a lot of money, and the taxes are certainly involved in that. A lot of companies are advising that we're going to have an impact from the possible tax rates in Illinois, Maryland, New Jersey next year. But this past year was a year of investment for BetMGM. They have about 6.5% of the market, which is third place in the country, but it's really nothing compared to FanDuel and DraftKings, which have 77%. And their mission is to compete with FanDuel and DraftKings. So in order to do that, this past year, they spent almost $300 million on purchasing technology that would essentially make their product better to try to compete with those sports books. They spent a lot of money on rolling out more features in Nevada as well as across the country. And also, we've talked about it a bunch of times before. It was a really bad NFL season for the sports books. So when you combine that along with the tax headwinds, these companies are kind of, the investors are telling them, hey, maybe we were spending too much money in this past year. You got to look for ways to trim the losses. Now, BetMGM has not come out and exactly said why these employees in Jersey City are going to get eliminated. I mean, I have to feel for them. There's 83 employees at this office who are going to be eliminated, and they don't know when they don't know who they are. It's going to happen sometime in May. The only reason we know about this is because there was a filing with the Department of Labor in the state. But surprising, because BetMGM, again, has been one of those companies that's been able to spend so much and been able to compete because they have MGM Resorts backing them. They have a lot of money. So now that we're seeing one of these very large players look for ways to trim losses, especially at their headquarters in New Jersey, which was a very big thing when it came out in 2018. Very big office, big, drum up with the state and everything. It's definitely concerning. So definitely have to feel for these employees and figure out how BetMGM is going to kind of try to reverse course going forward with all these losses.
Yeah, a good point. Symptomatic around the country with sports betting. I mean, we've, sort of topped out the amount of states and maybe, in a way, the amount of employees that you could potentially have. If no new clients are coming in, that could mean employees are going out. All right. Well, we've covered, Sam, this story over and over again over the last few years. I guess we're going to do it again here today. Sports betting's been online in Mississippi, one of the first states to legalize it, have it in person, and they have not been able to get online sports betting going. There's been fights with the casinos. They, simply put, they want people going there in person. Is there any change in that view? I know they keep talking about change, Sam, but every time it feels like it gets close, it goes the other way.
Yeah, well, if we're not going to run out of states to talk about anytime soon, we're probably going to keep talking about Mississippi, keep talking about Georgia, keep talking about Minnesota for a couple of years to come. It makes reporters like myself, it gives us more to cover, more to do. But unfortunately, it's been the same story in Mississippi. Although this bill was advanced, this bill they have that would legalize online sports betting, it did make it out of a key House committee ahead of a deadline this week. So it's still alive. There's still hope for it. But it's not looking great because the changes that were made to this bill would kind of conflict with what happened in the Senate, which is already kind of rejected. So this bill has passed the House already, which is pretty far. It's a good, significant milestone in terms of wanting to get online sports betting legalized. But in terms of will it happen this session, it's not looking great because the Senate has been sort of so resistant to it. Mississippi, of course, was one of the first states that legalized sports betting back in 2018. But their casino industry has been very resistant to changing it from just in person to bringing it online. So you have a lot of appetite for online sports betting in Mississippi, and it's only going to keep growing every year. I think there was a poll that came out pretty recently. I think about 77% of respondents said they're in favor of legalizing online sports betting, which then the politicians take to the floor and say, hey, the people want this. But of course, they don't just serve the people. There's also a very big casino industry. So as far as states that are completely eliminated, I wouldn't put Mississippi in that category yet. There's still some time to get this done. We'll see if they can make any kind of concession with the casinos. Online sports betting is obviously only going to get bigger and bigger. The argument is it's happening anyway. You might as well legalize it. But it's not shaping up to be a great for their prospects this year. We'll see if it happens maybe next year, maybe the year after that.
Yeah, we never know, Sam, with Mississippi. Always keeping a close eye on them. All right, Sam, have a good weekend, and thanks again for coming on. We'll catch up again next week.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. You too.
All right, Sam McQuillan with us from Legal Sports Report. Just a quick reminder for those of you who don't have the SportsGrid app, it's been updated. It is faster. It is better. And all of the requests that you guys have had out there on streaming and how to view our shows, download it now, folks, because it has been completely revamped. Make sure if you have the app that you update it in the App Store or Google Play. If you don't have the SportsGrid app, download it right now. It's available for both iOS and Android. So download it, SportsGrid app, available for you right now. Coming up next, we are watching a ticking clock in the National Hockey League. There have been some significant trades. The Colorado Avalanche, the Florida Panthers, Boston could be in play. We're going to take a quick break and come back and tell you about all the trades that were made and some that could be made next.
Philadelphia 76ers, they tried to play two different things. They tried to play contender, and they tried to play protect Joel Embiid. It wasn't doing Joel Embiid any good. This goes back to what I've talked about numerous times on this network. Why did they let him play in the first place? Why was he on the Olympic team? I mean, we looked at it last year in the playoffs against the Knicks. The damn kid was on one leg.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this one?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire. Time is ticking. The NHL trade deadline coming your way 3 o'clock Eastern. So that means Shukri Wrights is going to be refreshing and posting and tweeting and refreshing, scrolling. Did I miss an adjective, a verb? I'm not sure. But he's covering the NHL trade deadline for SiriusXM and Believe Network. You can follow him on social media as well for the very latest. Shukri, it's great to catch up with you for the first time here on our show. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Craig. It's an honor to be on the program on what has been already a crazy morning in the NHL.
Yeah, and we're going to get to some really hot rumors, too, here in just a minute.
Yeah.
But first, let's talk about what has been done. Your thoughts on the Colorado Avalanche making a trade to help them right now, sacrificing a little bit of the future. Break it down for us.
The Colorado Avalanche acquired Brock Nelson from the New York Islanders in a deal in which that I am amazed and stunned, but at the same time, I think that this is a monstrous move for the Colorado Avalanche because this was a team that, even though they have been without Gabriel Landeskog and there's no word as to when he'll be back at any given point, you added some serious offense to a top 6 forward group that's among the very elite in the NHL. You know, Brock Nelson is someone who's going to give you 25, 30 goals on average per season, and you add him to a group that already includes like Nathan McKinnon and Arturi Lehkonen. Like that's a pretty good group that's going to be able to to put the puck in the back of the net, especially in the playoffs where defenses are going to be a bit tighter. And Brock Nelson, with the grit that he also brings to the table, this is a big get for the Colorado Avalanche as they have Stanley Cup aspirations as well.
Yeah, and it could be a big year for them with the trade they make there. Meanwhile, where do the Devils stand at this point, Shukri, with Jack Hughes going on social media posting that he is going to miss the rest of the season? Talk about one of the best young players in the league shelved through the summer.
Yeah, when the news first broke, my first thought was I don't think it should change the Devils' approach in terms of what are they going to do at the trade deadline. I think they should still be buyers because when you lose a player like Jack Hughes' caliber from this team, you need to be able to find a way to at least supplement what you will be missing offensively. You know what Jack Hughes brings to the table in terms of his goal-scoring prowess and everything else he brings to the table, but you need still a little bit of that punch that you're going to be missing from Jack Hughes. And I think that today is a day where they should be looking to make at least a move to at least add offensively to a team that's already strong in other areas in terms of the Devils for this season.
As of right now, Mikko Rantanen is, from what I see, still on the Carolina Panthers, already traded once this season from Colorado. Is there a chance by 3 o'clock Eastern he goes on the move again?
I could see it happening, but last time I checked, Mikko Rantanen's contract situation is at a stalemate with the Carolina Hurricanes, in which that the team and as well as like the player themselves, they're trying to work on a potential contract extension. So if he gets traded to the Dallas Stars, the contract extension will be with the Dallas Stars, and like so right now that is really what's holding up the deal. So like if the Dallas Stars are not able to come to a contract extension with Mikko Rantanen, then all signs would basically point to Mikko Rantanen staying with the Carolina Hurricanes until the end of the season, and who knows what happens come free agency.
Yeah, that would be a big move and a stunning move to see a player like that traded twice in one season. All right, well, Shukri, I'm here in South Florida, so this is the one team that I do follow and I am familiar with. Once upon a time, their goaltender, Spencer Knight, was thought to be the goaltender of the future, but then Bob came in and they ended up winning a Stanley Cup, and to get better, you got to move players. I think Chicago's going to be really happy getting Spencer Knight. Will the Panthers be happy with this return for this season, getting Seth Jones, and they also get a pick back?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that when you talk about the Florida Panthers and the Chicago Blackhawks, this is a trade that absolutely is a home run for both teams. The Blackhawks have the goaltender of the future, in present and future, in Spencer Knight. Meanwhile, the defending Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers, they have a legitimate defenseman in their back end, and Seth Jones that you know what he brings. And what's interesting to me is that when he made the comments about a couple of weeks ago in regards to not being happy with the direction where the organization is heading and being frustrated with how things had stood, I thought that this was the beginning of the end for Seth Jones in Chicago, that it would be most appropriate for him to get traded. So when the Florida Panthers came knocking, I thought it was a perfect fit in terms of trade partner, in terms of what both organizations needed, and as well as for a Florida Panthers team that right now they are banged up. They're going to be without Matthew Tkachuk for an extended period of time. They needed help on the back end as well, and you add a stallion of a defenseman in Seth Jones who can help out offensively as well. I think this is a big get for the Florida Panthers and their aspiration to repeat as Stanley Cup champions.
Yeah, we'll see if it works out for them. Meanwhile, the hottest name and the biggest name in rumors, I mean, this seems to be surprising to me that the Bruins could trade Brad Marchand. I know they've been working on a contract extension. I know in the last few minutes, social media post indicated maybe he could get traded to the Maple Leafs. My gosh, like this would be the biggest move at the trade deadline without a doubt.
If it happens, wow. I mean, wow. In terms of the Maple Leafs. But as far as the Bruins trading away their captain, Brad Marchand, I have been consistent about this for the last several months. I've talked about it on the Hub of Champions podcast on Believe Network and Sirius XM, whereas this is an organization that is in absolute need to retool. And I think that Brad Marchand getting traded wouldn't surprise me if it happened today. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that up until now, they still have not come to an agreement to a new contract extension for their captain. So I think that it is going to be absolutely critical for the Bruins to either get a deal done or at least see what will be the best return possible for the Bruins in order to trade off Brad Marchand to a contender out west.
All right, Shukri, let's end with this and take a look at the FanDuel Sportsbook's odds for the wild card here as we end up with the potential of several teams still being in the mix. As you can see there, Ottawa and New York are the two favorites there down the wire. Do you see it the same way, or can any other team jump in?
I think that Columbus and Ottawa will be the two wildcard teams, and I do believe that with the Ottawa Senators acquiring Dylan Cousins, it could potentially be a benefit for both the team and as well as the player. Dylan Cousins getting a new scenery, and as well as Columbus, what a tremendous year that has been for what has been under some very difficult and emotional circumstances for the organization.
Shukri, great job. Enjoy the deadline today. Keep that phone scrolling. We'll catch up again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Philadelphia 76ers, they tried to play two different things. They tried to play contender, and they tried to play protect Joel Embiid. It wasn't doing Joel Embiid any good. And this goes back to what I've talked about numerous times on this network. Why did they let him play in the first place? Why was he on the Olympic team? I mean, we looked at it last year in the playoffs against the Knicks. The damn kid was on one leg.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this once?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire as we get ready to wrap up our Friday edition of the show. We got some shenanigans going on off the air. You can't see them or hear them. It's probably a good thing. We're going to talk a little bit about this Olympic snowboarder to exit the show. We're also going to hit on Mark Cuban's comments on Luka, and Paul Skeens continues to make waves in the memorabilia world. Time now for some last licks. This is filed under crazy. Yeah, filed under insane at the end of the show. There's an ex-Olympic snowboarder by the name of Ryan Wedding who has been added to its 10 most wanted list on Thursday. And the U.S. State Department is offering a $10 million offer to whoever can find this guy. I mean, this is crazy. The reward is because allegedly he was involved in running a multinational drug trafficking network and orchestrating multiple murders to the drug ring. Quote, Wedding went from shredding power on the slopes of the Olympics to distributing powder cocaine on the streets of U.S. cities and in his native Canada. His aliases, according to the FBI, are El Jefe, Public Enemy, and James Conrad King. He was charged in June with murder and drug crimes, and they were augmented in September. I mean, this is amongst the strange but true. Wedding finished 24th in a parallel giant slalom at the 2002 Olympics, and now is facing some very serious allegations, not silly, but serious, and also the potential of spending the rest of his life in jail. So if you've seen him and you know him, you can contact the FBI and get $10 million. Speaking of millions of dollars, it may have been $1 million or two mistake to trade Luka Doncic. At the time, I didn't think so. I thought, we're going to find out some stuff's been going on with Luka. This is why you would do this deal. Nico Harrison's actually going to be the smart one. But I think I'm going to be wrong. Former majority owner of the Dallas Mavericks. Now, most people understand at this point, Mark Cuban is not the majority owner. He sold that. And he has a minority ownership now for the Dallas Mavericks. So he's still an owner, but not 50%. So he's not the controlling partner. Doesn't seem like Mark Cuban was a fan of this deal. Here's the quote. If the Mavs are going to trade Luka, that's one thing. Just get a better deal. No disrespect to Anthony Davis. If we had gotten 4 unprotected ones and Anthony Davis and Max Christie, this would be a different conversation. And this kind of stinks for a lot of reasons. First reason is that, I mean, if you're Mark Cuban, you're still a partner of some kind in the ownership of the Mavericks. You're sort of taking a shot at your own employee. And secondly, it's just not good for business for the future of the Mavericks to know that Mark Cuban, who, by the way, is a supremely popular figure in the history of the NBA, didn't like the deal. So I can't imagine the other owners are happy with this. Mark Cuban's never been afraid of speaking his mind, and we have to applaud him for doing so. But at the same time, it's just sort of a bad look all around. And it also tells you that Mark Cuban would not have traded Luka. I don't know if you remember when he was dealt, but they showed video of Mark Cuban when he found out it happened. And he clearly was shocked at the time. All right, Paul Skeens getting set to pitch opening day in Miami against Sandy Alcantara. I'll be at that game on March 27th. Paul Skeens' debut patch. This is on a baseball card for his debut. These have been really popular. It finally hit the auction block last night at 7 p.m. Eastern. 51 bids. This thing is higher than I thought it would go. All right. Remember when we were on the show and I said, probably go for like 200, 300,000. 51 bids, already at $340,000 for this Paul Skeens card. The guy has won like a dozen games in Major League Baseball, and it's over $300,000. It's crazy. His most expensive card to date, 2023 Bowman Chrome Draft Superfractor, which sold for $123,000 in September. This is going to shatter that. Needless to say, if you ever pull a Major League Baseball debut patch and a team offers you some season tickets or a chance to sit with Libby Dunn, take the money because you're going to make a lot more. And I'm glad that this person decided to take the money. And nothing wrong with what the Pirates offered, season tickets or everything like that. But as you can see, this is going to go for at least $500,000. So congrats to the person who pulled this card. All right, congrats to us. We made it through another week. Really good week of shows here, I think, on NewsWire. Thanks again to Gilbert McGregor for coming on. Thanks to Shukri Wrights for talking some NHL draft. In addition, thanks to Sam McQuillan from Legal Sports Report. Had some fun with everything that we hit on the show today. And we're going to have more fun coming up this weekend because, of course, Bay Hill, the Arnold Palmer Invitational, is on right now. And that means Smiley's coming up next, talking some golf. That's followed by Scott Farrell, 3 o'clock Eastern. And then you can hit us up for Game Time Decisions tonight in Game Live Game Day. And then Gabe on Sports Rage tonight. I'm sure he'll recap all of the trades in the National Hockey League. For our director, Luke, and my producer, Frank, I'm Craig Mish. I hope you have a great weekend. I'll see you back here Monday morning for our next edition of NewsWire or tomorrow morning on Fantasy Sports Today. Have a great week, everyone. See you then.